Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to the notice of motion 2. I would like to invite Councillors Carrie Harper and Mark Jones to introduce and formally move and second the next motion for debate, please.
Diolch, Chair. This motion's on universal credit. And I'll start by saying that I'm sure the majority of people here, including local Tory councillors, would be critical of the way that universal credit is being rolled out. But that accepted, there is no getting away from the fact that universal credit is unfortunately just the latest flagship welfare reform policy inflicted on us from a UK Tory government in London. And this policy is part of the wider austerity obsession, which in terms of welfare reform includes the bedroom tax, the benefit cap, cuts to disability benefit and other equally archaic policies. And the bottom line is that all of these austerity policies are a thinly veiled attempt to dismantle the welfare states across the UK, ensuring that the most vulnerable in our society pay the price for the financial crisis they have nothing to do with creating. Now, universal credit merges 6 benefits into one monthly payment, and the UK government tell us it was necessary both to incentivise work and also to simplify the benefits system. Now, I find it difficult to understand how driving people into poverty, making people reliant on food banks and pushing them into the arms of loan sharks incentivises anything other than anxiety, stress and desperation for people who are already very vulnerable. And remember, many of the people that we're talking about who are affected by this are actually in work. So far from simplifying the system, what we have here is a policy that's ridiculously complex as well as being cruel. By its nature, this policy is implemented on low-income families and particularly those with children. We've heard the shocking figures in Wrexham showing that almost 90% of our council tenants transferred to universal credit are in rent arrears. And with potentially 6,000 to 7,000 households locally being affected by the time this is fully rolled out, I feel we're yet to see the full impact and the scale of the misery that this policy is going to bring. One of the biggest fundamental flaws with universal credit has been the built-in 6-week waiting period for the first payment, but the truth is that a quarter of claimants are waiting well over 6 weeks. For many people, it's more like 8 weeks or 10 weeks. Following the UK budget, we heard that the minimum 6-week wait will now be reduced to 5 weeks next year, but this is a tiny gesture. It doesn't go far enough to tackle the fundamental problems, and it certainly won't help any of our residents in Wrexham before Christmas. And people are struggling. I got some figures just last week from some services in Kaya Park to try and establish what the impact has been since the increased rollout at the start of October. And between just 3 local services offering help and advice, they'd had roughly 200 inquiries between them. That's just in Kaya Park. And speaking to staff at the Kaya Park Partnership, they've told me they've had to increase the amount of food bank vouchers they're giving out as a direct result of universal credit because people are struggling to feed themselves and their families. I've got no doubt the impact is just as severe in other areas of the borough too. And along with our residents, it's actually this council and other key public services who will ultimately pick up the tab for this policy through rent arrears, through temporary accommodation costs, discretionary housing payments, through our social services and through our mental health services. Now ultimately, driving people into debt and poverty like this doesn't save money, it doesn't uncomplicate the system, and it certainly doesn't motivate people to find work. It does, however, have a huge cost both economically and socially. Now, in Scotland and Northern Ireland, limited powers on social security have already been devolved, meaning that at least able to offer their community some protection, such as paying people fortnightly instead of monthly, and ensuring that the default situation is that rent is paid directly to landlords. And although they obviously can't fix all the damage, they can mitigate some of it. And that's a situation I hope that we'll see in Wales through the devolution of those same powers here. But at the moment, unfortunately, again, we lag behind. So whilst hoping for changes in future, both from the UK government and the Welsh government, in terms of further devolution, as things stand, we can only do what is within our power. And as a local council, that has already involved staff here doing a lot of work to try and best prepare for universal credit and to offer people the right help and advice. And I would praise the work of staff in housing, our estate offices across the borough, and at the contact centre as well, who I know are doing all they can to help people. I'd also praise the third sector too, who are working equally hard in the most difficult of circumstances with reducing budgets. But I feel that as councillors and as a council, although we might not be able to do much about what's being dumped on us from on high, we should do what we can. And that's why I've put this motion forward today, so that we can collectively put our concerns on the record and express our worries about the impact this policy is having and will continue to have on the people we represent. The motion reads, we call on the UK Government to pause the rollout of universal credit in order to address the substantial concerns expressed by charities, the third sector and others about its implementation. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Councillor Mark Jones, are you going to second that?
Thank you. I'm very happy to second this. I think it's very important that we send a very clear message to the government in London, because it is us as a council who will have to pick up the pieces if this fails. We as a council, as Carrie has explained, will have to pick up the pieces and take the fallout for all of this. I think it's an opportunity for us to send a very strong message to the Conservative government in London.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Leader to respond, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whilst understanding the concerns around the introduction of universal credit, and again, Chair, this motion I can't support, and it's only again because of the wording, and I will explain in my amendment why. I cannot support the motion as it is presently worded. I am concerned that it is not within the Council's power to pause the rollout. So we cannot, and we've got no power to pause it or to stop the rollout. I am concerned that it is not within the Council's power to pause the rollout. And all effort must now be on supporting claimants to get the benefits which they are entitled to, rather than to cause confusion and uncertainty. And I use the word confusion and uncertainty because if it was paused, what would come in their place? What would happen? And at this present moment in time, within Wrexham, we have 650 successful claimants, and it's been rolled out, and we have 253, and their claims are being assessed. So if we support this, and they did pause it, what would happen to the 650 who are already in the system, and the 253 which are waiting for their claims to be assessed? I do believe it would cause confusion and uncertainty. So what I'm going to do, Chair, is move an amendment. And this is how I'm going to word it, so I propose the following amendments. The Council therefore resolves to: we note the UK Government's intention to roll out universal credit despite the substantial concerns expressed by charities, the third sector and others about its implementation. But given that Wrexham Job Centre went live as a full service site from the 4th of October this year, and as I say, we have 650 and 253 in the system, the Council should continue to work closely within the Department for Work and Pensions locally to mitigate the impact upon our constituents, residents, and provide the necessary support as and when they require. So that is my amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchard, do we have a seconder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In seconding the amendment, I think it would be appropriate for me to comment on some of the remarks made by Councillor Harper. One thing that was certain was that the concept and the principle of universal credit was accepted by nearly all the political parties at Westminster. The concept, the simplified process of providing benefits to the community. The purpose of the amendment is to ensure that rather than politically grandstanding, what we're seeking to do here is to focus on the people of Wrexham. As the leader has already indicated, the universal credit process has started in Wrexham, and therefore it is right that we as a council focus on those needs. And this is what the amendment seeks to do. The proposition does not in fact make any real reference to the people of Wrexham, whereas the amendment seeks to ensure that we continue to work hard to ensure that this system is rolled out in a way that benefits the residents of our community and our county borough. And therefore I have pleasure in seconding the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Dana Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the sentiment within this motion really is about the delivery of universal credit, because it's not working for so many people, including the residents within, many residents within Wrexham. The pause is asking really for the delivery of universal credit to be reviewed, and how our residents within our community receive their money, and how we can effectively, by lobbying as a as a collective council, lobbying UK government to actually pause and review how they deliver, so that it benefits more of our residents and puts less and less of our residents into arrears, rent arrears and debt as well, so they have more chance of managing the money that is now being altered through bringing in universal credit. So we as a Labour group totally agree with the sentiment within this motion, and will be supporting the motion, because we believe it's very much to, it's for everybody across the UK, but also those residents within our own communities who we see on a daily basis are struggling managing more and more debt. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Malcolm King.
I do object to the idea that this is political grandstanding simply by raising concerns about the poorest and most vulnerable people in our society. As it happens, I understand all political parties in the United Kingdom have spoken around this issue, around pausing it to get it right, that it's forcing more and more people into debt and into ruinous situations. And indeed, even quite a number of people in the Conservative Party as MPs have raised the same issue and have been pressing their own government for exactly this. I don't think it's right to accuse those Conservative MPs or all the other MPs and all the other political parties and all the charities in Britain who deal with vulnerable people, that they are political grandstanding. I think that's a really gross misconception and a misdescription of what they're trying to do. Indeed, and the Plaid Cymru group today. The idea that this is confusing because some or other the person who that Councillor Harper is somehow suggesting that we have power to change it ourselves. I can't possibly see how that could have been misunderstood in what was being proposed. I don't believe, and surely none of us can believe, that for one second that Councillor Harper believes that we have the power as a council to change it. That's not what was being proposed at all. So raising that is a pretty ridiculous red herring. So I do believe that we should be giving this support to the motion, because it's important that we support anything that stops poorer people becoming poorer. And of course, as Councillor Harper has very ably pointed out, no one benefits from that, including the council. In fact, it's likely that our costs will rise considerably as a result of it. But I can't see there being any loss to the council doing this. In terms of pausing the arrangements, that's what most people have been suggesting, and it doesn't mean that people will be left without being paid any money. It just means that the rollout will not continue until they manage to get it right. And given that there is a widespread consensus that it's not right at the moment, even if the conception of it is right, it's clearly that the practice of it is entirely wrong. So I do believe we all ought to morally support this motion and not be misled by some really strange and misplaced descriptions of it by the leader and deputy leader.
Thank you, Councillor King. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Carrie Harvey? There's no other speakers before Carrie comes back in. Okay, Carrie.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to say, I'm really disappointed. You know, I naively thought this might be one thing that we could all agree on, but, you know, there you go. One thing I would ask for clarity on, I think what Councillor Pritchard has put forward is a new motion, it's not an amendment. So can I ask for some clarity on that? Clearly the call is on the UK government to pause the rollout of universal credit. I'm not asking this council to do that. I don't see how that's confusing. And in terms of what would happen if the rollout was paused, as Malcolm's just pointed out, that the current system would take its place. So I don't think that's an issue either. Thank you.
Do you want to come later?
I can confirm that the wording that was put forward by the leader is an amendment, because it leaves out some of the words that was in the original motion, but adds additional words also.
Okay. Can we have the wording for the original, for the amendment, please? Because I believe it's a substantial change. It argues against the original motion completely.
The wording that I have here is: we note the UK government's intention to roll out universal credit despite the substantial concerns expressed by charities, the third sector and others about its implementation. But given that the Wrexham Job Centre went live as a full-service site from 4th October this year, the Council should continue to work closely with the Department for Work and Pensions locally to mitigate the impact upon customers and provide the necessary support as and when required.
Okay, Councillor Jones. Okay, I would now like to put the amendments up, please. Voting. For. Against?
Have I missed one? Yes, yeah.
Abstentions?
So that's 431 against 19. So the amendment was carried, so we now need to put that as the substantial motion.
Okay. The results are 431 against 19, no abstentions. Therefore, the amendment is carried as a motion. Okay.